I lost my father to save myself, the day I chose self-respect over his money. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I want to tell you about the night my entire life shattered, yet somehow became whole. It was at my father's retirement dinner, a glittering high society event. I stood there expecting a moment of reconciliation, maybe even acceptance. Instead, he forced a final confrontation that ended with him cutting me and my husband, Owen, out of his multi-million-dollar will. The old me would have collapsed. But in that moment, I realized the price of his approval was my soul. That night, we didn't lose his fortune. We found our freedom. This is the story of how walking away from everything I was raised to chase let me to find unconditional love, a thriving business, and the family I always deserved. If you've ever had to choose between your mental health and a toxic relationship, hit that like button. And stick around because I'd love to hear your story in the comments below.
At my father's corporate farewell banquet, he raised his fluted glass and stated, "My true heirs are the ones who multiplied my expectations." A round of polite applause followed. Then, he looked directly at me and delivered the cutting instruction, "You are dismissed." I felt the floor drop and began to rise, but my husband followed suit. What occurred next silenced the entire room of patrons. The words echoed in the stunned quiet of the grand dining room, searing my focus, freezing my spirit. "You are dismissed." My own father, Wallace Atherton, a man of rigid control, had just publicly rejected my presence. But he was utterly unaware that his calculated cruelty that evening would trigger a revelation, delivered by the most unexpected voice, one that would completely redefine the meaning of loyalty for me. I am Sierra, and that brisk autumn night changed everything. Growing up in Greenwood, an exclusive suburb of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, achievement wasn't just appreciated, it was mandatory. From the exterior, our granite estate, with its meticulously sculpted gardens, projected perfection. Inside, the reality was starkly different. My father, Wallace, a prominent real estate mogul, was a man who coldly assessed worth, success, and especially any perceived failure. My mother, Beatrice, was graceful and subdued, ultimately yielding to his demanding presence. She would offer quiet assurances after his rebukes, but never openly opposed him. I lost her to a swift illness when I was 22, and with her, the only protective barrier between my father's severe demands and my harsh existence. My older siblings embodied everything I was not. Rhys, 5 years my senior, joined my father's industry, quickly rising at a celebrated development firm. Tamsin, 3 years older, became a renowned neurologist, gathering awards as easily as breathing. They were the exemplary offspring, the benchmarks, the ones who gave our surname weight and value, as my father frequently reminded us. Then there was me. From a young age, I was drawn to nature and photography, finding solace in visual narratives when my personal life became too difficult. I still recall my 14th birthday exhibition. Acquaintances and family filled our lounge, and I was displaying my landscape prints. My hands shook slightly as I presented a print, and I accidentally knocked over a small framed piece, just one. My father stood abruptly, adjusted his jacket lapel, and walked out. The hushed crowd heard only the front door closing. I continued the presentation with tears blurring the camera lens, but I finished. That incident, that single misplaced frame, defined our connection. One slip was all it took to be judged insufficient. University offered a brief period of relief. I majored in art history at Vanderbilt, explicitly ignoring my father's command to study finance. "You're squandering your potential on fleeting images," he'd sneer. He declined to finance such a worthless pursuit, so I funded my degree through grants and evening jobs. Those years cultivated resilience, but they also deepened my struggle with doubt and fear. I had accomplished something I felt proud of, only to hear my father's critical voice wondering why it wasn't more lucrative. I dated occasionally, but the relationships never lasted long. I either chose men who mirrored my father's dismissiveness or drove away the genuine ones before they could realize I wasn't good enough. Everything shifted 4 years ago in a botanical garden in Nashville. I was sketching the rare orchid collection, reaching for a specific color pencil just as another person reached for it. I looked up to see Owen Vance. He had thoughtful eyes and an easy, comforting laugh that made me feel grounded for the first time. Please, you take it. Anyone that focused on dendrobium deserves the perfect shade. We ended up strolling and talking for hours at the nearby fountain. Owen was a civil engineer who cherished art and design almost as much as I did. He listened when I shared my thoughts, truly listened, without interrupting or preparing a counter-argument. When I mentioned my aspiration of launching a small gallery specializing in overlooked regional artists, he didn't mock it or call it unrealistic. Instead, he asked insightful questions about my logistics and pricing. 8 months later, with Owen's unwavering encouragement and practical help with the construction layout, I launched the Prism Gallery. We focused on challenging abstract and modern works, opening modestly with just 3 artists our first year. By year 2, one of our artists had secured a national grant, and we had expanded to represent 7 talents annually. It wasn't generating a fortune, but it was instilling confidence. Owen and I were married in a small ceremony at the local observatory. My father didn't attend, claiming an essential property deal closure in Dubai. Rhys sent a costly but impersonal sculpture. Only Tamsin represented my family, departing immediately after the brief vows for a medical summit. "They are blind to your worth," Owen murmured, as we swayed at our receptions surrounded by friends and his warm, welcoming family instead of mine. I hadn't exchanged more than a few essential words with my father in almost 3 years when the engraved card for his retirement gala arrived. 50 years at Atherton Holdings. Wallace Atherton was stepping down as Chief Executive Officer. A black tie event at the Gilded Hearth, Philadelphia's most exclusive venue. "We don't have to endure this," Owen said, noticing my hand trembling as I handled the thick ivory card. "Perhaps this is his attempt at reconciliation," I suggested, though I knew better. Maybe things will be softer now that he's concluding his career. The night of the banquet, I stood before our closet mirror in a fitted emerald dress that was a significant splurge. My hair was meticulously pinned, my makeup expertly applied to conceal the anxiety-induced sleepless nights. "You look magnificent," Owen said, adjusting his own tie nearby. "I feel like a fraud," I confessed. A wave of intense anxiety washed over me just as we prepared to leave. Owen sat with me on the edge of the ottoman, guiding me through the measured breathing exercises my counselor had recommended. His hand drew slow, calming circles on my back as my heartbeat gradually steadied. "We can still cancel," he reminded me. "No," I said, carefully reapplying my lip color with slightly shaky hands. "I have to see this through. I need to try to find peace one last time."
As we drove into the city center, Owen squeezed my hand. "Remember, regardless of what transpires tonight, you are cherished for precisely who you are." I nodded, desperately wishing his truth could override decades of conditional validation. Deep down, I still felt compelled to earn the right to be accepted. And tonight represented one final attempt to, at last, make my father feel pride. The gilded hearth stood like a fortress, its imposing stone facade illuminated against the deepening autumn sky. My shoes clicked against the polished marble like a solemn rhythm. "Keep your focus on me," Owen whispered, his grip steady at the small of my back. Inside, enormous wrought iron fixtures cast a dramatic, warm light over a gathering of approximately 90 people, the financial and social elite of Philadelphia. I immediately spotted Rhys, holding court near the drinks bar. He was encircled by eager business associates, his platinum watch gleaming. "Sierra," he noted when he saw us, his smile not quite reaching his distant eyes. "Didn't expect you to show up." He offered Owen a minimal handshake before turning back to his inner circle. "This is my youngest sister and her husband. Sierra runs a tiny art space, isn't that right?" Before I could clarify, he launched into a conversation about asset portfolios, not bothering to acknowledge our presence further. Owen gave my hand a reassuring squeeze as we quietly moved away. We found Tamsin near the appetizer display, striking in a bronze gown showcasing a massive sapphire engagement ring. "Winter wedding at the Plaza Hotel," she was announcing. She noticed me. "Sierra, you actually came." Her eyes performed a swift, subtle appraisal of my dress. "Emerald is certainly safe." She introduced us to her fiancé, Elias, a cardiothoracic surgeon with immaculate poise. The discussion centered exclusively on their upcoming nuptials and a recent surgical trial. Soon, Tamsin excused herself to greet more important attendees. "Your siblings are precisely as advertised," Momin murmured. I was reaching for sparkling water when a cold hand gripped my elbow. Aunt Vivian, my father's sister, pulled me into a rigid air kiss that smelled of expensive cologne and clear disapproval. "Sierra, dear," she air kissed near my cheek, "you seem rested." The fractional pause spoke volumes. She leaned in, her voice hushed. "Just try to impress him tonight. It's vital for his image, especially with all these major investors present." Before I could formulate a reply, she was already moving toward Tamsin, gushing over the engagement ring. The banquet room was a display of considerable capital and influence. Conversations revolved around quarterly earnings, offshore properties, and elite university applications. I finally located my father, holding court in a circle of distinguished, mostly older men. At 68, Wallace Atherton maintained a formidable stature. He laughed loudly at something one of the men said, and for an instant, I saw a genuine warmth I had rarely experienced directed at me. Owen sensed my reluctance. "Want me to go with you?" I shook my head. "I need to do this alone." Taking a steadying breath, I approached. He saw me coming, but continued his discussion until I was standing awkwardly at the perimeter of the group. Finally, during a lull, he acknowledged me. "Sierra, you managed to make it." His tone conveyed mild disappointment, not satisfaction. "Congratulations on your retirement," I said, presenting the wrapped gift. "Thank you." He accepted it without glancing at the contents. "Gentlemen, my youngest, Sierra. She operates a small gallery. I own my own independent art space, actually. We just had an artist featured in the Mid-Atlantic Contemporary Review." My father's expression remained impassive. Sierra always had her head in the clouds, playing with canvases while her siblings pursued serious, real careers. The men chuckled dutifully. "Speaking of, Rhys just finalized a $90 million development deal. And Tamsin is engaged to Dr. Elias Sterling, a chief surgical fellow at Penn Medical." The message was unmistakable. Their successes were worthy of mention. Mine were not. "It was nice seeing you," I said softly, retreating before the tears stinging my eyes could fall. Owen was waiting with a fresh glass of water. "That rough?" "The usual," I managed, taking a substantial sip. I watched my father navigate the room like a sovereign ruling his domain. The contrast of his icy detachment toward me became even more pronounced. When it was time for the main course, we were seated at a table far from the elevated platform where my father, Rhys, Tamsin, and the VIPs were situated. "I'm Owen Vance, Sierra's husband." Owen introduced himself genially, undeterred. "You're Wallace's daughter, the one who isn't a surgeon or real estate tycoon?" an elderly woman asked. "I own a gallery," I confirmed. "How nice," she said, with the exact tone one uses for hobbyist's craft project, a side business. Throughout the four-course meal, I observed my father at the central table, laughing and fully engaged. Periodically, he would place a hand of obvious pride on Rhys's shoulder or beam at something Tamsin said. It was a paternal warmth I had seen directed at them, but never at me. Owen squeezed my hand under the table consistently, his quiet, solid support the only thing preventing me from walking out entirely. The filet mignon was flawlessly prepared, the wine exquisite, but everything tasted like dust in my mouth. After the final course, the formal addresses commenced. The company president spoke about my father's contributions. A long-term business associate shared nostalgic, light-hearted memories. Rhys gave a slick, rehearsed speech, managing to steer the focus mostly back to his own professional trajectory. And then, it was my father's moment. The room fell silent as Wallace Atherton approached the microphone stand. My heart accelerated, hoping against all reason that this public reflection on his long career might include some brief, minor acknowledgement of my existence. "Thank you all for attending tonight," my father began, his voice projecting effortlessly. He spoke eloquently about his time in the business, the risks and the triumphs. He thanked collaborators and acknowledged those he had mentored. The audience was captivated. This reflective, almost sentimental version of Wallace Atherton felt foreign. "None of this would have been possible," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "without the foundational support of my late wife, Beatrice." My breath caught. He seldom mentioned my mother since her passing. "Beatrice understood the sacrifices required for true accomplishment," he said, a hint of fragility in his voice. "She was my anchor during the challenging initial years, and I deeply regret she cannot be here tonight to witness what her dedication helped me achieve." Tears welled in my eyes. This was the most genuine emotion I had seen from him in years. Perhaps retirement had softened his edges, opened something long sealed off to me. Guests delicately dabbed at their eyes. Owen's hand found mine under the table once more. My father cleared his throat, regaining his severe composure. "But a man's ultimate legacy is not measured in land holdings or investment figures. It's measured in what he leaves behind, in who carries forward his discipline and standards." My heart soared. Was this it? "I've been fortunate in that respect," he continued, gesturing toward the main table. "Rhys has surpassed all expectations, becoming not just a developer, but a true pioneer in urban planning. The Stanton Tower project alone would be career-defining for most, but for him, it's merely one triumph in a long record of superiority." Rhys gave a modest, acknowledging nod. "And Tamsin," my father's voice swelled with obvious pride, "preserving lives every day as one of the region's top neurologists. Just last quarter, executing a complex procedure featured on the cover of Medical Quarterly. Intellect, rigor, precision, everything I strove to cultivate." Tamsin offered a small, composed smile, her new ring catching the light. My father then raised his glass significantly higher. "So tonight, as I conclude one major chapter of my life, I look with immense satisfaction at what holds the greatest meaning. My true heirs are the ones who made me proud." The room erupted in sustained applause. People turned to congratulate Rhys and Tamsin, who accepted the attention with practiced ease. I sat completely frozen, the words striking me like physical blows. My true heirs, as if I was not a part of his lineage at all, as if I was an error he wished to delete. But the ultimate blow was still to come. As the applause faded, my father's gaze swept the room and settled directly on me. The air seemed to chill as our eyes met across the vast distance. "You are dismissed," he said, his voice perfectly clear in the now hushed room. Initially, some guests looked puzzled. Then heads started to swivel in my direction. Whispers circulated through the crowd as the brutal truth sank in. My father had just publicly disowned me. My chest tightened painfully. The elegant room blurred into a haze, my vision narrowing. Blood pounded in my ears, deafening me to everything except his cold glare and those 3 crushing words. Across the room, Aunt Vivian's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with palpable shock. Evidently, even she had not anticipated this level of severity. Tamsin examined her pristine nails, refusing to meet my gaze. Rhys wore a faint, superior smile, as if our father had just delivered a particularly witty punchline. The silence lengthened, growing unbearable. Dozens of pairs of eyes focused on me, witnessing my profound humiliation. My legs felt shaky as I slowly pushed back my chair and stood on trembling limbs. The slight sound of the chair scraping was deafeningly loud. Shame burned within me like a toxic liquid. This was not merely another private disappointment. This was a public rejection, a declaration that I was unworthy of even occupying the space. I had devoted my entire life to trying to earn my father's approval, and in that single instant, he made it abundantly clear that I never would. I tightly gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself, fiercely resisting the impulse to flee or burst into tears. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me completely undone. I was forced to leave. I would do so with whatever composure I could summon. Then came the sound that altered the trajectory of the moment. The scrape of another chair right next to me. Owen stood, his movements deliberate and unhurried. His face, when I glanced at him through my fog of shame, showed not the slightest embarrassment, but rather a quiet, controlled rage. A confused whisper spread through the room. My father's expression tightened, his jaw clenching at this unanticipated act of defiance. He had not expected any opposition to his decree, certainly not from my husband, whom he'd always dismissed as an irrelevant appendage to an already flawed branch of his family. "Sit down," my father commanded, addressing Owen directly for perhaps the first time all evening. "This matter does not concern you." But Owen did not sit. Instead, he stood to his full, considerable height, shoulders squared, his gaze locked firmly with my father's across the ballroom. The tension was acute, almost visible. No one moved. No one uttered a sound. And then Owen performed an action that would forever segment my life into the past and the future. Owen reached for his water goblet and a teaspoon with deliberate, slow movements. The gentle ping of metal against crystal cleanly cut through the uncomfortable silence, capturing every eye in the room. The recognized signal for attention before a formal address. My father's face immediately turned red with fury at this outrageous breach of propriety. This was his night, his victory, his carefully stage-managed display of dominance. Owen had just publicly challenged that in the most polished yet utterly unmistakable way. "What exactly are you attempting?" my father demanded, but his voice lacked its usual commanding authority. Owen ignored him, waiting until the room was absolutely silent, every guest frozen in anticipation of this sudden turn of events. His hand was perfectly steady as he set down the spoon, his expression composed yet unyielding. I had never witnessed this side of him before, this silent, powerful conviction. "I would like to propose a short tribute," Owen began, his voice clear and carrying, "to the woman Wallace Atherton consistently failed to appreciate." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. My heart pounded against my ribs. Next to me, a distinguished older gentleman murmured, "Good heavens," to his companion. For those unfamiliar, I am Owen Vance, Sierra's husband, and since Wallace has elected to share his version of reality tonight, I feel compelled to share the truth about the daughter he just instructed to leave. My father took a step forward. "That is sufficient. Security will remove you both." "By all means," Owen countered evenly, "but I wonder how the Philadelphia Herald would report on Wallace Atherton having his own daughter and son-in-law forcibly ejected from his monumental retirement celebration. I am certain your colleagues would find that detail quite riveting." My father froze. His eyes darted quickly around the room at his professional peers. His reputation and carefully constructed image had always been his foremost priority. Owen had found the one point of leverage that was truly effective. 4 years ago, Sierra established the Prism Gallery, using her own personal savings and a modest business loan that she secured entirely without any family assistance. Last year, they exhibited the works of Jasper Cole, which was not only shortlisted for the Regional Art Prize, but has just been optioned for a major museum touring exhibition. Murmurs of intense interest swept through the crowd. This information was even new to me. Owen must have received confirmation today and decided to hold on to it for a surprise. What Wallace conveniently omitted is that Sierra's gallery has provided a vital platform for artistic voices that major institutions ignored, including former service members, recent migrants, and yes, individuals who grew up in emotionally restrictive homes. Owen never faltered, his gaze remaining fixed on my father. Her community outreach initiative has introduced art supplies and classes to over 5,000 underserved youth in the city's poorest districts. I felt a profound sense of unreality, as if observing a pivotal scene in a movie. Owen was publicly defending my worth, detailing achievements my father had either completely dismissed or never cared enough to learn about. While Rhys was conquering the stock market and Tamsin was advancing her medical career, it was Sierra who quietly took an extended leave of absence from her studies to personally care for her mother during her final illness. Sierra, who sat by Beatrice's bedside reading her favorite nature journals when she was too frail to hold a volume herself. My throat tightened with emotion at the powerful memory. Those quiet, shared hours with my mother had been sacred and deeply meaningful. What Wallace also doesn't know, Owen continued, his voice hardening, is that the capital for Rhys's initial London flat purchase came directly from Sierra's university trust fund.
She gave it to him when his reputation was nearly ruined. After that high-risk gambling debt he worked so desperately to conceal from his father. Rhys's face drained of all color. That had been a profound secret between us, a rare moment of genuine, desperate connection. When he had come to me, broken and ashamed, I had helped him because, despite everything, he was my sibling. I never once expected any acknowledgement, certainly not for him to ever stand up for me against our father. For 35 years, Wallace, you have conditioned Sierra to believe she was inadequate, too sensitive, too focused on nonprofits, too divergent from the blueprint you mandated. You have rationed your affection, used your approval as a weapon, and tonight you have attempted to crush her spirit in front of everyone whose opinion you value. Owen looked around the room, addressing the stunned guests directly. But here is the core truth about loyalty. True family does not demand flawless performance reports. True family does not measure love against professional success. True family affirms you, encourages you, and stands by you even when circumstances are challenging, especially when they are challenging. My father finally found his voice again. You have absolutely no right to speak this way in front of my respected colleagues and personal friends. You know nothing of our dynamics. I know enough, Owen replied firmly. I know that a man who publicly denounces his daughter at his retirement banquet is not celebrating a legacy. He's exposing the failure of his character. The room was so overwhelmingly quiet, I could distinctly hear the faint clink of ice in glasses. No one moved. No one appeared to breathe. Owen turned to me then, his expression softening instantly. Sierra is the most courageous person I have ever known, not because she achieved her father's impossible standards, but because she endured them and became her authentic self. He raised his water glass one last time, turning back to my father. So thank you, Wallace Atherton, for providing us with the precise example of the kind of parent we will never be. With that, Owen set down his glass and gently took my hand in his. The secure warmth of his fingers around mine steadied me as the room swam with shock, mortification, and a new, unfamiliar sense of profound vindication. Together, we began to walk toward the exit, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. No one attempted to intercede. No one spoke a word. The collective breath-holding of 90 stunned guests created a silence so complete it felt physically heavy. As we neared the heavy doors, my father's voice, now raw and slightly panicked, finally pierced the silence. "If you depart now, don't ever dare to return," he yelled, desperation overriding his anger. "You are both financially and personally cut off. Do you comprehend? Both of you." We did not slow our pace. We did not turn around. Owen's grip remained firm and reassuring in mine. As we passed the final table before the entrance, an elderly woman I recognized as one of my father's longest-serving corporate counsel caught my eye. Almost imperceptibly, she offered a small nod, a subtle gesture of silent respect, or perhaps unexpected sympathy. It was the very first time anyone from my father's inner circle had acknowledged me as anything other than a disappointment. The massive doors swung shut behind us, muffling the immediate explosion of conversation that erupted in our wake. The valet, having clearly overheard the dramatic commotion, avoided eye contact as he quickly retrieved our vehicle. The cool night air hit my flushed face like a pure, cleansing wind after the stifling, tense atmosphere of the banquet hall. Owen opened the passenger door for me, then walked swiftly around to the driver's side. Neither of us spoke until we had pulled away from the gilded hearth, the imposing facade shrinking in the rearview mirror like the setting of a particularly painful memory. "Are you all right?" Owen finally asked, his voice tender in the darkness of the car's interior. I was not. I felt profoundly shaken, deeply wounded, and yet strangely, impossibly liberated. Something that had been coiled tightly within my core for decades had finally fractured, leaving me exposed, but somehow incredibly lighter. "I truly don't know," I answered honestly, "but I believe I will be eventually." Owen reached for my hand again, and we completed the drive home in silence, leaving behind the devastation of false expectations and pretense, driving toward a future I could not yet define, but one I desperately yearned to embrace. The emotional floodgates broke as soon as we entered our quiet apartment. I collapsed onto our sofa, uncontrollable sobs tearing through me as 3 decades of repressed emotional pain violently erupted at once. Owen simply held me, without uttering a single word, his shirt becoming damp with my tears, his arms steady around my shaking frame. "I'm so sorry," I gasped between deep sobs. "I'm so sorry you were forced to do that." "I'm not sorry," Owen said firmly. "I have wanted to say those exact things to your father for 4 years. He will never forgive us." The thought brought a fresh wave of tears. Despite the truth, a stubborn, wounded part of me had never fully surrendered the hope for a magical reconciliation, for the loving father I needed, instead of the severe one I had. That is entirely his loss, and frankly, Sierra, his forgiveness holds no value. We remained awake until almost 4 a.m., discussing and processing what had just occurred. The initial overwhelming shock gave way to a complex blend of emotions: grief for the parental relationship I would permanently never have, intense anger at his cruelty, deep fear about the consequences, and underneath it all, a fragile, tentative sense of genuine freedom. "Do you believe I perhaps went too far?" Owen asked as we finally prepared for bed, the first hint of vulnerability in his voice all evening. "You defended me when absolutely no one ever has," I said, "including myself." Sleep came in restless, short bursts, frequently interrupted by the insistent ringing of my phone. My father called 9 times between midnight and dawn, leaving increasingly furious messages demanding an immediate retraction and threatening serious repercussions. I allowed each call to proceed to voicemail, my phone screen illuminating the deep darkness of our bedroom like a harsh, unwelcome light. The morning brought a chilling text message from Tamsin. "You have consistently needed to make every situation revolve around your drama. Dad's retirement was solely meant to be his night. You and Owen ruined everything, as you always do. I stared at the message, realizing just how fundamentally differently we perceived the same event. In her narrow reality, I was the malicious antagonist who had stolen our father's moment of glory, not the clear victim of his crushing public rejection. The unexpected twist came at 11:05 a.m., when Rhys called. I nearly declined the call, anticipating more accusations, but a strange compulsion made me answer. "That was a hell of a performance last night," he said, his tone impossible to read. "I didn't engineer a performance," I replied stiffly. A distinct pause. "I know that." Another pause. "Is the truth about the apartment money what Owen said?" "Yes." "Why did you never use that as leverage against me all these years, even when I was notably less than supportive?" "Because that isn't why I helped you," I said simply. The silence stretched significantly between us. Finally, Rhys spoke again, his voice subtly altered, somehow smaller and more hesitant. "I never thanked you properly for that, and I deeply regret that I didn't." "It truly doesn't matter now," I said. "Maybe it does." He cleared his throat. "Listen, what Dad did last night, it was beyond unacceptable. I've never seen him act like that. It was not a genuine apology, but it was the closest thing to empathy and solidarity Rhys had ever offered in our entire lives." After we finally hung up, I sat staring at the phone, unsure exactly what to make of this unexpected change. At work that Monday, my mentor, Miriam, took one quick look at my exhausted face and immediately ushered me into her private office. "You appear to have survived a major conflict," she noted, pouring me a fresh cup of tea. "What exactly transpired?" I recounted the greatly condensed version. Her response was instantaneous. "Take the rest of the week off. We will fully manage the upcoming Hopkins exhibition without you." "I cannot simply stop functioning because of personal family drama," I protested. "Sierra," she said, with profound gentleness, "if you had broken a physical bone, you would allocate time to heal it. Your father broke something deep inside your spirit. That deserves the identical consideration." I reluctantly agreed to 4 days off, spending them oscillating between deep bouts of weeping and numb, mindless television viewing. Owen worked remotely from home, providing comforting company while respectfully giving me the space I needed to process. The outside world continued its pace, entirely oblivious to my internal earthquake. On Friday, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Aunt Vivian clutching a large manila document holder and looking uncharacteristically hesitant and uncertain. "May I possibly come in?" she asked quietly. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to allow her entry. She perched awkwardly on the edge of our sofa, refusing all offers of refreshment. "What my brother did was truly indefensible," she said without any preamble. "I should have spoken up that night, and I failed to do so. I have been a willing enabler of Wallace's behavior for years, telling myself it was just his established way." She handed me the large envelope. Inside were very old family photographs I had never once seen. My mother, pregnant with me, looking absolutely radiant. Toddler me perched happily on my father's strong shoulders, both of us genuinely laughing. A past family holiday where my father was patiently teaching me to fly a kite. His expression was soft, patient, and kind. "He was not always this closed off," Aunt Vivian said softly. "After your mother first became ill, something profound shifted in Wallace. He became obsessively fixated on control, on externally measurable success. It was almost as if by perfectly ordering and controlling his external world, he believed he could keep tragedy at bay." I studied the photographs, these fleeting glimpses of a paternal figure I genuinely did not recognize. "That still does not excuse his behavior," I whispered. "No," she agreed. "It absolutely does not. But I felt you should know that there was once a time when he loved you without any caveats. That capacity for unconditional love still exists in him, deeply buried beneath years of professional fear and bitter disappointment." After she departed, I carefully placed the photographs in my desk drawer, unable to look at them any longer but completely unwilling to discard them. The swift family implosion generated significant shockwaves throughout our entire extended social and family network.
Distant cousins I rarely spoke to texted me for complete details. My father's sister-in-law even called to say that she had consistently thought Wallace was far too demanding of me. The family history was being instantly rewritten in real time, with long-established power dynamics suddenly opening up for re-examination. 6 days after the banquet disaster, my father's name appearing on my caller ID triggered a panic attack so incredibly severe that Owen had to talk me through the therapeutic breathing exercises for over 30 minutes.
That night, he thoroughly researched therapists specializing in family emotional abuse and complex trauma. "You require professional, expert support," he stated, showing me a concise list he'd meticulously compiled. "This is far beyond what I can help you process and heal." I chose Dr. Penelope Rivers, a woman whose warm, kind eyes and professional, no-nonsense expression in her online photo immediately inspired my trust. My first formal appointment was scheduled for the following Tuesday. "What if this experience completely shatters me?" I asked Owen the night before. "What if I am forced to discover I am even more irrevocably damaged than I currently believe?" "You are not damaged, Sierra. You are profoundly hurt. There is a key difference." He pulled me close to him, and sometimes things must completely break open before they can properly begin to heal. A week after the retirement dinner public confrontation, my father appeared completely unannounced at our apartment complex. The doorman called up, politely asking if we wished to receive Wallace Atherton. My hand visibly shook as I held the intercom receiver. "It is entirely your decision," Owen said. "We are within our rights to refuse." "No," I decided, taking a deep breath. "Let's definitively conclude this chapter." My father looked noticeably smaller somehow as he walked into our apartment. His usual commanding presence was significantly diminished outside his accustomed settings of power. His eyes scanned our humble but welcoming apartment with palpable disdain. "I've come to resolve the situation," Wallace announced, omitting any formal greeting. "That scene at my farewell was completely unacceptable." "You instructed me to leave in front of everyone," I firmly reminded him, my voice holding steady. "What outcome did you anticipate?" "I expected you to respect my decision. Instead, your husband engineered a spectacle that completely sabotaged my entire career celebration." Owen, who had previously agreed to allow me to manage this confrontation alone, remained silent beside me, his solid presence reassuring. "Did you travel here to offer an apology?" I asked. My father looked genuinely perplexed. "Apologize for what? For being transparent about my disappointment? I've given you every opportunity to achieve professional success, and you've systematically rejected them all." In that definitive moment, I understood with perfect clarity what Owen had been saying to me for years. My father was fundamentally incapable of seeing me as I truly existed. He could only perceive the ways I failed to conform to his specific blueprint. "I think you should depart now," I said quietly. "I am not finished," he snapped. "I came here to inform you that I have consulted with my legal counsel. If you and Owen do not issue a public, formal apology to me, you will both be removed entirely from my last will and testament. Is that perfectly understood?" The old Sierra would have instantly crumbled, would have agreed to anything required to regain his fleeting approval. But standing securely in my own home, with my husband beside me, and the rewarding life we had constructed surrounding us, I accessed an inner strength I hadn't known I possessed. "We do not want your assets," I said. "We never did. What we desired was your love, your acceptance. But I am finished trying to earn something that should have been unconditionally given." My father's face immediately hardened. "You will live to regret this. When you're struggling financially with your insignificant art hobby, you'll wish you'd exhibited more filial respect." "I respect myself now," I said. "That is sufficient."
He stormed out, slamming our door with enough force to rattle the framed pictures on the wall. One fell, the glass cracking sharply as it impacted the floor. It was a photograph from our intimate wedding day, Owen and I laughing joyfully as we shared cake. I knelt down to pick it up, carefully collecting the shards of broken glass. "Symbolic," I murmured. "What is?" Owen asked. "The only thing that broke was the frame. We are still intact." He helped me clear away the fragments. Neither of us mentioned my father again that evening. Instead, we ordered takeout, opened a fine bottle of wine, and seriously discussed whether Portland, Oregon might be the right place for a complete fresh start. The concept of moving, of creating physical distance to align with the emotional reality, felt increasingly correct. As I finally drifted to sleep that night, I realized I hadn't apologized for a single thing all day. It was a minuscule victory, but profoundly significant for someone who had spent her entire life saying sorry just for existing. "Tell me about your father," Dr. Penelope Rivers requested during our first formal therapy session. For the next 50 minutes, words streamed out of me. Stories I had never fully organized and articulated, even to Owen. Dr. Rivers listened without any judgment, occasionally making quiet notes. At the conclusion of the session, she looked at me thoughtfully. "Sierra, have you ever encountered the term emotional abuse?" That simple, direct question initiated a 3-month deep dive through family dynamics, trauma response mechanisms, and the slow, difficult process of reclaiming my fundamental self-worth. Dr. Rivers helped me clearly identify patterns I'd previously normalized: my father's transactional love, my siblings' specific roles in our dysfunctional family system, my own established adaptive behaviors that had once provided protection but now severely constrained me. "Healing is never a straight line," she gently cautioned me. "You will inevitably experience setbacks. There will be days when the old core beliefs feel more real than the new ones. That is normal." She was correct. There were mornings I awoke convinced I was fundamentally flawed beyond repair. Afternoons when minor criticism from a collector sent me spiraling into devastating self-doubt. Evenings when I automatically checked my phone, hoping desperately for a message from my father, despite everything that had occurred. The panic attacks persisted. Dr. Rivers suggested I consider medication. "It does not have to be permanent," she professionally explained. "View it as a crucial support tool while your nervous system successfully learns new, safer patterns." The low-dose anti-anxiety medication made a palpable difference within a few weeks. The constant, dreadful background noise quieted significantly. Sleep came much easier. I found myself laughing more spontaneously with Owen, engaging more confidently with artists and colleagues at the Prism Gallery. Meanwhile, Owen and I diligently researched Portland in earnest. The city's thriving arts community, progressive social values, and the sheer physical distance from Philadelphia all strongly appealed to us. We created extensive spreadsheets comparing potential neighborhoods, housing market costs, and ideal office spaces for the Prism Gallery's expansion. "Are we simply running away?" I asked Owen one evening. "We are running towards something better," he corrected me. "There is a profound difference." Our decision became definitively solidified when Owen received an unexpected job offer from a Portland-based tech firm developing advanced architectural visualization software. The position came with a substantial salary increase and the flexibility to work remotely 3 days a week. "It's like the universe is confirming our plan," he declared, showing me the celebratory email. We established a 6-month timeline for the move, giving us sufficient time to wrap up projects in Philadelphia and transition the gallery's operations thoughtfully. I was explaining these imminent plans to Miriam when her eyes suddenly widened at something moving behind my shoulder. "Sierra Atherton." A woman approached my desk, her expensive, distinctive fragrance clearly preceding her voice. "I'm Victoria Nash. I served as your father's executive assistant for 18 years. My stomach immediately tightened. "If my father sent you..." She shook her head. Wallace has no idea I'm here. I retired last month, so he cannot possibly fire me for having this conversation. She glanced around. Is there somewhere we could speak with genuine privacy? Over lattes in a nearby cafe, Victoria shared startling stories that confirmed my worst long-held suspicions and revealed entirely new dimensions to my father's behavior. His relentless perfectionism and cutting dismissiveness weren't reserved only for me. They extended ruthlessly to his staff, especially female colleagues. He routinely reduced junior associates to tears, claimed credit for others' original ideas, and harbored deep grudges for years over the most minor perceived infractions. The night of that retirement banquet, 3 longtime colleagues approached me separately to say they had always thought Wallace was unnecessarily cruel toward you, Victoria confided. Your husband's unexpected speech, it deeply resonated with countless people who had personally experienced your father's darker, tyrannical side. Why are you sharing this with me now? I asked Victoria. She stirred her coffee deliberately. Because for 18 years, I watched you try relentlessly to gain the approval of a man who habitually moves the goalposts every time someone gets close. I watched you silently blame yourself for his emotional inability to show love. And all that time, I stayed silent. She reached across the table, briefly touching my hand with sincere regret. I am not staying silent anymore. That difficult conversation with Victoria was unexpected, powerful validation, external confirmation that I had not imagined or exaggerated the cruelty of my father's treatment. It strengthened my core resolve to build a new, successful life completely unshackled from his corrosive influence. In the subsequent weeks, I reached out to cousins on my mother's side of the family whom I'd entirely lost touch with after her death. To my surprise and delight, many eagerly welcomed the reconnection. My mother's sister, Aunt Clarice, invited Owen and me for a weekend stay at her upstate New York home, where she shared warm family stories and photographs I had never encountered. Your mother would be so immensely proud of the capable woman you've become, Aunt Clarice told me, showing me my mother's old college journals. She was a talented landscape artist too, you know, before she met your father and reluctantly adopted his restrictive priorities. This powerful glimpse into my mother's own unfulfilled creative ambitions established a new, deep sense of connection with her memory. I'd always assumed my artistic tendencies were random, an inexplicable anomaly in a family of strictly practical professionals. Learning they were a genuine inheritance from my mother felt like peacefully reclaiming a vital piece of my identity. Months after the retirement dinner confrontation, I was giving a short speech at a regional arts event about the Prism Gallery's mission to amplify overlooked, diverse artistic voices. Halfway through the address, I suddenly realized I was speaking with flowing confidence, without the constant internal self-editing and deep self-doubt that had previously accompanied any public appearance. You were magnificent, Owen declared. I didn't visualize my father's disapproving face even once, not even when I accidentally stumbled over the artist's name. It was a definite breakthrough, Dr. Rivers acknowledged in our next session. You are actively internalizing a new core voice. Your own voice of self-acceptance is becoming significantly louder than his voice of destructive criticism. Our Portland plan steadily progressed. A house hunting trip secured a charming craftsman home with a large, converted, detached studio, perfect for a small office and my gallery preparation. We put down a security deposit. The commitment to our imminent fresh start was now tangibly concrete.
Back in Philadelphia, I expanded the Prism Gallery's mission, establishing a special imprint for visual memoirs focused on family healing and the difficult recovery from emotional abuse. The entire project felt both professionally energizing and profoundly personally meaningful, a constructive way to transform my immense pain into a clear purpose. My relationship with Rhys continued its tentative, slow thaw.
He called occasionally, our conversations gradually evolving into something less superficial. During one such call, he confessed that he had courageously started therapy himself. That night at Dad's retirement, it violently forced me to examine some uncomfortable things I'd been desperately avoiding, he admitted. Like how I've spent my entire professional life chasing Dad's approval and how utterly exhausting that constant performance is. Tamsin remained firmly aligned with my father's perspective, sending a formal wedding invitation addressed only to Owen, with a small handwritten note reading, "No conflict, please." We declined with an equally formal response card and a generous gift from their affluent registry. 6 months after the retirement dinner public confrontation, Owen and I were discussing the possibility of starting a family. A crucial conversation I'd always avoided, fearing I had inherited my father's capacity for emotional devastation. "What if I resemble him?" I whispered, giving voice to my deepest, most private fear. "What if I am incapable of loving a child unconditionally?" The simple fact that you are asking that painful question means you will not be like him, Owen said, pulling me close. You are aware of the destructive patterns. You are actively doing the vital work to heal them. That same night, I had a truly breakthrough therapy session where I finally expressed my pent-up rage toward my father without tempering it with understanding or seeking excuses. Dr. Rivers encouraged me to write him a long, detailed letter I would never send, pouring out decades of accumulated hurt and anger. "I despise what you did to me," I wrote, my pen pressing so hard it visibly tore the paper in multiple places. "I despise that you made me believe I was fundamentally flawed. I despise that even now, a small part of me still craves your approval." The emotional release was intensely cathartic. Afterward, I realized it had been multiple weeks since I had thought about my father on a daily basis. His power over my inner emotional state was rapidly diminishing. His profound absence was becoming less of a raw wound and more of a settled, manageable fact. Our last week in Philadelphia, I received an entirely unexpected email from my father's former corporate counsel, the elderly gentleman who had offered that subtle nod to me as Owen and I left the retirement dinner. "I am retiring to Portland myself next month. Wallace and I had a significant falling out recently over his harsh treatment of a young analyst, an incident that powerfully reminded me of his behavior toward you. If you and Owen are settled by then, perhaps we could meet for a coffee. Sometimes a chosen family is far more important than mere biological connections." As we meticulously packed our possessions into a large moving truck, I found the thick envelope of old photographs Aunt Vivian had given me. Looking at them now produced less immediate pain, as if they merely depicted characters in a distant story, rather than my actual family. I packed them carefully alongside newer photos. Owen and me hiking in the Cascade Mountains, our arts festival booth surrounded by enthusiastic collectors, a dinner party with cherished friends who loved us exactly as we were. On our final night in the empty Philadelphia apartment, Owen found me standing silently at the window, looking out at the city lights. "Having second thoughts?" he asked gently, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "No," I said truthfully, "just saying goodbye to the person I was here, the one who perpetually felt she wasn't good enough." "She was always good enough," Owen corrected. "She just couldn't perceive it yet." As we drove west the next morning, I realized I hadn't checked my phone for messages from my father in well over a week. It was not a deliberate, conscious decision, just the natural fading of a persistent old habit that no longer served any purpose. The constant dull ache of his rejection had transformed into something profoundly different. Not the absolute absence of pain, but the undeniable presence of self-respect. Portland welcomed us with a week of bright, unseasonable sunshine, as if confirming our decision was right. As we unpacked boxes and set up in our new home,
I came across the cracked wedding picture frame from the night of my father's final, bitter visit. I had kept the original frame, but deliberately replaced the shattered glass. "I think this belongs here," I said, carefully placing it on the mantel of our new living room. A reminder of what we brought with us and what we finally left behind. Owen smiled, understanding my meaning perfectly. The past definitively made us who we are, but it does not have the authority to decide who we are becoming. 1 year after my father's retirement dinner, I stood in our Portland kitchen, gently cradling a glass of sparkling cider. Through the wide window, I could see Owen grilling dinner on our back deck, surrounded by our new friends and lovingly chosen family. Bright spring sunshine filtered through cherry blossoms, casting a warm, dappled light across our garden. The past year had brought about changes I could not possibly have imagined on that painful night in Philadelphia. The Prism Gallery had actively flourished in Portland's supportive artistic community, winning a Small Business Innovation Award for our community art outreach programs. My therapy sessions with Dr. Rivers had successfully transitioned from weekly check-ins to monthly check-ins, and most significantly, I was now 4 months pregnant with our first child.
Need any assistance? Asked Aunt Vivian, who had flown out for our housewarming celebration. Her relationship with my father had grown significantly strained after she consciously continued maintaining contact with me. But at 68, she had finally made the difficult decision to prioritize her own genuine values over forced family harmony. "I'm perfectly fine, thank you," I smiled, handing her a large plate of appetizers to carry outside. The doorbell immediately rang as I was meticulously arranging a cheese board. I opened it to find Rhys, looking slightly travel-weary, but smiling tentatively. "Sorry, I'm delayed," he apologized. "My flight from New York was held up." I hugged him, still pleasantly getting used to this new, healthier, warmer relationship we were actively building. Over the preceding year, we had progressed from awkward, strained phone calls to open, genuine conversations. He had visited Portland twice before, each time opening up more about his own severe struggles with our father's relentless expectations. "Come in," I invited him. "Everyone is currently out back." "How is Chloe?" Rhys had recently started seriously dating a kindergarten teacher who seemed to consistently bring out a gentler, more authentic side of him. "She's well. She wanted to come, but she couldn't secure the time off," he explained. He hesitated, then handed me a sealed envelope. "I've been debating intensely whether to show you this, but I strongly believe you should be aware." Inside was a short, formal article from a Philadelphia business publication featuring a small, recent photograph of my father. The headline read, "Former Atherton Holdings CEO Wallace Atherton hospitalized following minor vascular incident." "He is physically stable," Rhys added quickly, noticing my concerned expression. "But this has been a severe wake-up call for him. He's alone a lot now. Tamsin visits when her surgical schedule allows, but her demanding residency keeps her constantly busy. He initially refused to hire help, but after he badly burned dinner and accidentally set off the fire alarms, the neighbors alerted me. I intently studied the photo of my father. He looked visibly older, diminished somehow in his bearing. "I am sorry to hear he is unwell," I said. "Truly. But I honestly do not know what you expect me to do with this specific information." Rhys simply shrugged. "Nothing at all, necessarily. I just believed you deserve to know the reality." I placed the article gently on the counter, promising myself I would process the news later. Today was about celebration, not reopening old, familiar wounds. The party flowed joyfully around me. A happy gathering of supportive people. My gallery colleagues chatted warmly with Owen's tech friends, and Aunt Vivian exchanged gardening tips with our immediate next-door neighbor. Rhys gradually relaxed, showing uncharacteristic curiosity in one of our exhibiting artists' discussions about narrative therapy.
As evening fully approached, Owen called for everyone's attention, raising his glass high. 1 year ago, Sierra and I made the single best decision of our lives, moving to Portland. But that entire journey began earlier, with a moment of raw truth at a certain retirement dinner. Knowing glances were exchanged among those who were familiar with our painful story. That single night could have completely broken us, but instead it fundamentally freed us. To Sierra, who powerfully taught me that true strength is not about never experiencing failure, but about rising every single time life knocks you down. And to all of you who have so quickly become our Portland family, thank you profoundly for welcoming us exactly as we are. Glasses clinked together as everyone happily toasted. Standing there, surrounded by such genuine, unconditional affection, I felt a sense of completeness I'd spent decades searching fruitlessly for. The external validation I so desperately sought from my father had always been a cruel mirage, vanishing the moment I approached it. Real acceptance, I had finally learned, didn't require contorting myself to meet someone else's narrow expectations. After our guests cheerfully departed, Rhys helped us clean up, an uncharacteristically domestic gesture as he diligently loaded the dishwasher. "I have one more confession," he said, folding a dish towel with unexpected, precise care. "I've been seeing a therapist regularly for 8 months now." "That is truly wonderful, Rhys. I'm genuinely pleased for you. It's completely changing how I perceive everything. Dad, myself, you." He leaned against the counter. "Did you know I was incredibly jealous of you growing up?" I nearly dropped the plate I was rinsing. "Jealous of me? You were the golden child." "I was the obedient child," he corrected me. "I did everything Dad demanded and received his fleeting approval, yes. But you always inherently knew who you were. Even when it came at a great cost, you remained true to yourself. I never possessed that kind of profound courage." We talked late into the night after Owen finally went to bed, sharing perspectives on our shared childhood that made me instantly see familiar events through completely new eyes. When Rhys finally left for his hotel, he hugged me tightly. "I am so sorry I was not a better, supportive brother," he whispered sincerely. "We are actively writing a new story now," I reminded him softly. "That is what truly matters." 3 days later, while browsing Powell's books, I received a short text message from Tamsin, the first direct communication in many months. "Dad, asking about you. Could be nothing, just thought you should know."
My hand instinctively moved to my slightly rounded belly. The old Sierra would have instantly dropped everything, rushed frantically back to Philadelphia, desperate for this potential opening for reconciliation. The new Sierra immediately recognized the message for what it truly was: Tamsin's way of subtly transferring responsibility, of ensuring any continued estrangement was entirely my choice, rather than our father's unyielding demand. After careful consideration and a long, honest talk with Owen, I composed a simple, measured response. "Thank you for letting me know. I sincerely hope he recovers well." Not a door forcefully slammed shut, but also not a desperate rush through an open one either. Just a calm acknowledgement of a shared, complicated humanity that existed completely independent of our shattered relationship. 2 weeks later, I had a completely chance encounter that profoundly crystallized how far I had truly come. While visiting a friend in the hospital after minor surgery, I rounded a corner in the hallway and nearly collided with my father. He looked immediately startled, then wary. He had noticeably lost weight, and a slight droop affected one side of his mouth, clear evidence of the vascular incident Rhys had mentioned. "Sierra," he said, his voice rougher and less imposing than I remembered. "Dad," I replied calmly, surprised by my own steady composure. Rhys mentioned you were dealing with some health concerns. I sincerely hope you are feeling better. He nodded stiffly. Just a routine checkup. Nothing to cause concern. We stood awkwardly in the busy hospital corridor, medical staff and visitors flowing around us like a stream around two unmoving rocks. You look different, he finally observed. I smiled slightly. I am pregnant, due in November. Something briefly flickered across his face. Surprise. Perhaps a tiny suppressed hint of some deeper, grandfatherly emotion. I see. Congratulations. Thank you. Another profound silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unsaid truths. I realized I was momentarily waiting for something, an apology perhaps, or even a brief acknowledgement of the immense pain he had caused. But his expression remained carefully neutral, his posture rigidly defensive. I should go. My friend is waiting. He nodded once. Give my best regards to Owen. It was such a conventional, meaningless pleasantry, so jarringly at odds with our last dramatic interaction that I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I simply nodded and moved past him, continuing down the brightly lit corridor. What profoundly struck me afterward was not what had happened, but what decisively hadn't. No accelerated, frantic heartbeat, no immediate tunnel vision, no desperate, consuming need to make him magically love me. I had spoken to my father as one separate, mature adult to another, without the debilitating weight of my childhood wounds dictating my measured responses. The encounter left me feeling contemplative, but not destroyed. He will never truly change, I told Owen that night. Not fundamentally. Probably not, Owen agreed softly. Are you truly okay with that realization? I considered the question deeply and carefully. I think I finally am. For the first time, I genuinely understand that his emotional limitations are not my personal failure. That autumn, as the Portland trees turned spectacular shades of golden orange and vivid red, we prepared our new home for the baby's arrival. Rhys visited twice, bringing impractically extravagant and expensive gifts for his future niece or nephew. Aunt Vivian sent handmade baby quilts and regular, detailed updates on extended family news, including the specific gossip that my father had recently begun seeing a woman from his church, a widow who was apparently willing to tolerate his difficult, demanding personality. Good for him, I said when I heard, genuinely meaning the words. His happiness, or unhappiness, no longer held the power to define my own. In late November, our daughter, Lily Beatrice Vance, was born after 20 hours of intense labor. Holding her perfect, tiny form for the very first time, I was instantly overwhelmed by a love so fiercely powerful and beautifully unconditional that brought immediate warm tears to my eyes. She is truly perfect, Owen whispered, gently touching her tiny, delicate fingers. Looking at our daughter's peaceful, innocent face, I made a silent, heartfelt promise. She would grow up knowing, without a single doubt, that she was entirely enough, exactly as she was born. Her intrinsic worth would never be tied to external achievements or demanding conformity to someone else's narrow vision. She would be completely loved for her authentic self, whatever unique shape that took. Rhys flew in to meet his new niece the following week, awkwardly cradling her with a tender mixture of pure terror and profound wonder. She has mom's eyes, he observed quietly, touching her cheek with an unexpected gentleness. I thought so too, I said, feeling a surge of warmth that someone else had noticed the specific connection to our late mother. He hesitated, then added, I informed Dad about her arrival. He didn't say much, but he asked to see a photograph. I nodded calmly, neither especially encouraged nor visibly distressed by the information. My father was now merely a peripheral figure in my life's story, no longer its defining central force. As Christmas approached, we held a small, intimate dinner for our chosen family. Friends who had quickly become essential pillars of our Portland life,
Rhys and his now serious girlfriend Chloe, and Aunt Vivian. Our new home glowed with genuine warmth and easy laughter. Lily passed safely from loving arms to loving arms as we shared delicious food and meaningful stories. After dinner, as we gathered comfortably in the living room with dessert, Owen proposed a toast of family. He simply stated, "Not just the one we are born into, but the one we consciously create through active love and careful choice. To family." Everyone echoed, glasses raised high. Looking around at these wonderful people who accepted me completely and unconditionally, who saw my unique strengths and acknowledged my weaknesses and loved me anyway, I finally understood the profound, ultimate lesson of that painful retirement dinner a year and a half ago. What had felt like an agonizing ending, the final, brutal rejection by my father, had in fact been a liberating beginning. By standing up and courageously walking out with Owen that life-altering night, I had taken the very first step toward definitively finding my true home. Lily began to stir and fuss softly, and I excused myself to nurse her in the quiet comfort of her nursery. Rocking gently in the chair Owen had meticulously restored for us, I intensely studied my daughter's perfect, serene face and felt a peace I had never experienced before. "You will never, ever have to earn my love," I whispered to her. "It is already completely and eternally yours." In that powerful moment, I realized I had finally given myself the exact same unconditional gift: complete, permanent acceptance of who I was, completely separate from any external achievement or relentless validation. The healing journey had not been easy or swift, and there were still undoubtedly difficult days ahead, but I had finally found my way to a core truth that had eluded me for 35 years. I was enough. I had always been enough. The sound of warm laughter drifted softly from the living room, and Lily's tiny hand gripped my finger with surprising miniature strength. This was my legacy now. Not my father's deep disappointment, but my daughter's bright future. Not a path rigidly dictated by someone else's outdated values, but one I was actively creating with each subsequent authentic choice.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope sharing this journey, the pain, the difficult choice, and the eventual triumph helps someone out there who might be struggling with a similar decision. Your worth is not defined by someone else's acceptance. I had to lose everything I thought I wanted to find the life I truly needed. If this story resonated with you, even in the smallest way, please tell me about it. Drop a comment below and let me know your biggest takeaway from this video, or share a moment where you chose yourself over toxicity. I read every single one, and your support means the world. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I'll see you in the next video.